Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm your boss, Joe Boston. Welcome to another trading stream. Man, we are going to be in for an interesting one today. Thankfully, the geopolitical news, while still quite volatile, is coming down a bit today. Things are more or less going sideways. So I thought today we would do maybe an indicator focused stream today. And considering I've started to see a lot more people starting to use Wayne's Pivots Pro here in the last few weeks. Maybe it's New Year's resolutions. People are starting to get into the indicators. They're looking to trade Q2, and Q2 tends to be pretty hot. So people wanting to learn how to use the indicators going into some of the best period ahead of us here for trading. I thought I'd go ahead and cover it as the developer for Wayne's Pivots Pro. And I'll go ahead and announce now, there is an upgrade coming. And this upgrade will be free for everyone. It's going to be great once I have more information to tell you guys. But I thought I'd announce it now that there is a big upgrade coming to Wayne's Pivots Pro. A huge upgrade. Now, for most pivot point indicators, it's like, a new feature here and there. Like, no, we're talking a total rewrite. Total rewrite. All right, let's hop into this and go over the feat. And that upgrade isn't going to be coming for a while, guys. But just know that upgrade is coming. So for now, and also everything I'm about to talk today is going to transfer over to that upgrade. So don't worry about like, oh, is some of this stuff going to be missing or change? Absolutely not. All this stuff will absolutely still be applicable for the upgrade when that comes around. Dollar short's finally working. Hope they hold through CPI. Says Gary. Yep. They definitely could. Right now, I think we're in for maybe one more push up and one more rejection. Just one more rejection here. And then we'll probably see something going on with the dollar. So, where to begin with pivots? What I like to do when I teach people how to use pivots is I like to first generally go over like the whole history of pivots, how they kind of came to be, and all maybe the calculations of it. Because when you first apply the indicator to your chart and you're looking at the pivot point biases, like the number one thing that everyone's on about when it comes down to trading pivots is, especially Wayne's Pivots, is what bias do I select? Of all these biases, which one do I select? And that is the hardest question to ask, because you're asked by the indicator to provide that on your end, to do that discretionarily, right? And I'm going to say right now, a lot of people do not know how to set this correctly. And the reason why is because they need to be doing good trade research. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, every single person who buys Wayne's Pivots Pro automatically gets access to the Wayne's Pivots Pro role in the Plan the Profit Discord. And this is the Discord where a lot of trade research is being done. And there's a trade forum where all that research then hooks back into actual trade plans. So this is just the general ground rules and like, hey, here's where the trade forum is. And you can see here's the trade forum that's covering all the around commodities crisis stuff. So this is all specifically stuff for, hey, here's the specific things going on with commodities and oil and what commodities are moving. And then we can share charts in here in these trade threads on, okay, this asset is moving. And then we can link back research from, if we go back to the welcome channel, to the research forum. And the research forum has all these different categories. It has outlooks, central banks, economics, wars and conflicts, elections, geopolitics. And you can see, who's talking about the Slovakian-Ukraine oil dispute right now. Viktor Orban is very mad at Zelensky, and that could cause issues for the euro if, because Orban right now is blocking, I think, what is it, 80 or 90 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine right now. And because he wants to get access to oil he's been allowed to have from Russia. The EU made an exemption saying, hey, if you're a landlocked country in the EU and you're getting all your oil from pipelines, you're exempt from the sanctions on Russian oil. But for those countries impacted inland, they have to get their oil from pipelines owned by other countries that aren't explicitly exempt, and they technically can still move stuff through their pipelines, but they really don't want to support selling. They don't want people buying Russian oil because that funds the Russian front. And so they're trying to get these guys to buy oil from somewhere else, but they don't want to because they say it's too expensive. And this thread just goes into the nitty gritty of every single one of those things. And then more stuff on the euro with German state elections, and there were French elections, and there's still going to be French elections coming up. And it's like how those municipal French elections, and by the way, there's all these different topics, right? You can go and search here by elections, and then there's the French municipal elections. And then here's who's likely going to win those elections. And then here's a bunch of research from all the people talking about it and all the major Wikipedia pages that you can pull up polling for. This is actual geopolitical research, because these things can impact fiscal policy for governments, and that fiscal policy can change how we evaluate whether an asset, especially for a lot of currencies, or if you're getting exposure to equities of a particular country, how those things can be impacted by the change in fiscal policy. Also, a change in government can mean a change in the approach in how central banks are, what their relationship is going to be with central banks, what the new government's relationship will be. So this stuff is critical to be watching and to stay on top of ahead of time. What I like to really explain, and how I'm going to tie this back to the pivots. When you go into this indicator and you look at this pivot bias setting, you have to have an expectation of what's going to happen next to discretionarily set this setting and to pick the correct one. Now, I can show you okay, here's the range bullish setting, and it says to buy down here and sell up here and put your stop loss right there. But obviously, going into the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, this is not the right bias to have. This is not the right expectation to have. If I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it's going to be a bullish continuation trade. And a bullish continuation trade, just before I even pull it up, it's going to have a buy zone right here between R0.5 and central pivot, and then the exit zone is going to be between R1.5 and R2. And continuation bullish. Right there. Right off the bat. There's your buy zone, and you had the bottom wick just right there in the entry spot right there. And then you would have exited somewhere around here. Done. Having the correct expectations allows you to set your bias in the indicator. So when someone comes to me and they say, Joe, or they go to any other mentor who's using my indicator and they say, how do I set these things? The good mentors will always say, well, we can look at the charts, but we really have to set an expectation. We have to look at maybe economic events that are coming up for the next week or the next month. And then we can use that to set our bias, set our expectation. Those are what the good mentors do. And you know, all the ones that I can just think of off the top of my head, including the person whose the indicator is the namesake of, Wayne McDonald, he explicitly does that. What I'm saying, though, is get into the Discord if you want a place to do research very, very collaboratively. Because I'm trying to emphasize here, if you want to be autonomous in setting your trade decisions, you have to be able to do this research on your own. It's great to have a mentor who can cut through straight to the answer, right? It's one thing where I can go and say, hey, if I'm showing you how to do pivots, here's, the only reason I was able to go and be like, oh, before I even change this pivot bias setting, let me pick like what happens to be the correct pivot bias. Now, there's two things here to keep in mind, just for like, I don't know, validity's sake, because there's an issue with this particular analysis, which is I can see the price where it's at right now. However, right here, Friday, February 27th, I was live streaming. And you know what I was doing on that live stream? I was going over all of this stuff in this particular thread for the Fall of the Islamic Republic. This thread is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of posts. And for the last 2 weeks, practically, I've been covering every single world leader, what they've been saying, all these different metrics for how many missiles and drones and cruise strikes, like all this stuff. This is very, very important. In fact, I mean, Ari is here right now in the chat. Ari, on Friday, we were talking about it just after the market closed on Friday, and we're like, dude, actually, before the market closed, I got to give Ari really huge props. This is like the purpose of a trading group. He was telling me the other day, around February 27th, I don't know if I want to stay short the US dollar going into the weekend. I know that's been the consensus expectation since December to have. That's what everyone expects. But I think because we started this thread, if we jump all the way to the top, Ari started this thread on January 3rd. We've been following this thing since the protests began. This was a huge, huge deal, and I'm so grateful to have Ari in the group. Because if he didn't start this thread, I would have had to start it, and I probably would have started it way too late. But because he brought it up first, I could then contribute. Well, it's like, oh, Ari's looking for stuff on this. Well, then I guess I know where I can get information on what's going on geopolitically. I can contribute to this. And so I'm saying, get into the Discord and contribute to some of these threads. Like if you're from France or you're from Spain or you're from Germany, it would be great if you translated maybe some local news sites about how the performance of certain politicians are currently going, and then what are their political biases, what are their policies that they want to push, how do they want to maybe change taxes, what are their views on the central banks, what are their views on fiscal policy, and then we can take that information and move it into the trade forum and say, hey, if so-and-so gets elected, this seems to be the play, and if so-and-so gets elected, this seems to be the play. I mean, that's how it was when we were trading in the trade group. I mean, the 2024 US presidential election, we did that phenomenally. We set great expectations, but that's also because we were on top of 2 weeks, 3 weeks before. We were following the union strikes by the ILA and the I forget the UAW. The International Longshoremen Association and the United Auto Workers Unions in the United States were both going on strike. And those had major impacts on the US election. Major impacts. Because Trump actually knew the head of the ILA and that dude's father, who was prior also the head of the ILA. And they cut a deal. And guess who the longshoremen voted for in that election? They voted for Trump. And when Trump got elected, he fulfilled a promise for the ILA shortly after. Like, these things are really important to follow. And there are many, many, many geopolitically tradable events, but it requires you to follow them. And then that information informs your expectations on when new information comes down the pike. You can go ahead, set up an expectation, and then properly set your damn pivot bias, right? It's not the other way around where you look at the chart and you're like, this thing probably is probably going to go up. It's probably going to go up, I think. And then you go and do confirmation bias research, where you look for things that are going to try and confirm a bullish bias. Now, a lot of smart people will, at that point, if they go and do their research and find contradicting information, they will then change their expectation to being bearish, right? If they find contradicting information. But it's a lot harder to do that on your own, or to know if you're doing adequate research, which is why I keep stressing, guys, hop into the research forum, help out with these threads, and communicate with the rest of the trading group here, because this is all free. There's a paid section, the Boss Trading Group, and that comes with not just Wayne's Pivots Pro, actually. It comes with probability pivot points. And this is the same thing as Wayne's Pivots Pro, but it includes seasonal data to give you odds, seasonal odds of where the top or where the bottom is going to be for the month. Now, during major geopolitical risk events, when you're using seasonal data like this, because these odds come from seasonal data, you can actually run into a really big issue where a big geopolitical event like Operation Epic Fury begins, and you commit too heavily to making decisions based on seasonal expectations. Again, it's exactly the same issue as I pointed out with the guys who just use basic Wayne's Pivots Pro. When you go here and you set a bias before doing all the research, right? You're just picking any one of these things and then doing research, or not even doing much research at all, and then trying to trade just some random bias. It's really not going to work out too well. A lot of people do not do well with that approach. However, the same thing also applies to even people who have these statistically enhanced versions of the pivots. And this version of the indicator also has the biases. So if you did the exact same work that I just described in doing all that geopolitical research, going into, like we did back when we were just going into Operation Epic Fury on the 27th, like we were following the entire buildup of the U.S. military there, and I got some conflicting information about, they're going to send Marco Rubio to Israel, but at the same time, they're pulling out every single U.S. diplomat. They're pulling out every single U.S. government official that they can out of the Middle East, but then at the same time, they want to send Marco Rubio in 3 or 4 days later. It just doesn't make that much sense to me. So it was a huge confliction. And it was like an hour or two later, I had that chat with Ari about like, hey, dude, this is looking like they're going to go in this weekend. I don't know about being short the dollar here. And I changed my expectation. I was like, it's time. It's time to get out here, cry uncle, right? Because I was in line with the consensus like everyone else was. But when you have all this information and all this research coming through and you actually follow it, it's very easy to let yourself update your expectations and change. And it's even easier when you have other people who are also generating that same concern and who also have a good track record of doing good research on their own end. So it's really, really, really important to be a part of a place. And this place is free, right? This is a free Discord. There's no, again, there's a paid section right here. You can check out the group research part. Like, sure. Like, these are some select highlights in the group research, and then you can see here's the trade log section where people post their, like, hey, I went long at this price and here's the chart. Hey, I went, and then I have my trade thread as well. But this trade forum here is where we're going to be connecting the research to trades. And if you want to post your trades here in the trade forum and you don't want to join the trade group, all well and good. All well and good. But when you join the trade group, you get access to probability pivots and all these other fancy indicators that I make. But this is just to say, hey, you gotta, if you want to be able to set this setting here, or in Wayne's Pivots Pro, if you want to be able to set this setting competently, you need to be doing good research. And it's a lot easier to do it in the kind of structure that I have set up. So please get into that damn Discord. Okay? It'll make life so much easier for so many people to have more people contributing. Because I'm already doing pretty good work. I already keep up with all this stuff. But I see other people struggle, and people who use my indicators who just don't know about this stuff. So I'm going to be very explicit and just say, as a call to action, get in the server. This stuff exists, and it's here to help you get better with setting better trading expectations to use these indicators. And again, even with these fancy statistically based indicators, if you go ahead and you set continuation bullish here, look at that. It's saying, hey, the odds for this trade were still pretty unlikely, but guess what? You still hit it. Actually, the nice part about this is it was saying, hey, if this is really your expectation, you need to set your targets higher than R2. So if I go ahead and I hide the price chart real quick, just because it kind of gets in the way a little bit. So looking at these odds, it's saying, hey, about, well, first we have to look at the low odds here, because I like to start with what are the odds of hitting the entry and what are the odds of hitting the stop loss for this particular bias. Right off the bat, using seasonal historical data, right? So if you're setting your expectation based off a geopolitical issue, then seasonal data is not going to be the right way to interpret things. It's just not. Because these geopolitical tail risk exogenous shocks do not behave seasonally. They very frequently will go wildly against seasonal trends or really far extrapolated from whatever the current seasonal trend is, just coincidentally. So when things like Operation Epic Fury are occurring, you can't put your eggs into the, all into the same basket of doing seasonal analysis. It's not enough. Arguably, what's more useful is in the Discord, again, a live news feed, the Squawk chat here. That's constantly giving us the latest bit of information. Look, Supreme Leader, the new Ayatollah, was lightly injured but is still continuing to operate. There were a lot of rumors the other day, for the last couple of days actually, that there was an assassination attempt on his life and that he's unconscious. And a lot of people were wondering if Iran was just trying to save face and, they didn't want to admit that their second Ayatollah, the son of the last one, had already been killed. And I don't know if there's been proof of life yet, but the Iranians are claiming that he's injured and still operating, but I want to see proof of life at this point. I want to see proof of life that he's actually alive at this point. I want to see a video of him speaking and saying, I'm here. And it doesn't make much sense to me that they wouldn't do that already if he was alive, because there's been already been all this hubbub about whether or not he was assassinated or not. So see what I mean by already new information, useful stuff, helps us set better expectations about how progress is going with Operation Epic Fury. And again, seasonal data here, probably not the best. So in the trading group, let's go ahead and move, let's say, away from this. But in the trading group, when a seasonal expectation, frankly, isn't enough, right? Then we can go ahead and use non-seasonal data. This is the range probabilities indicator. This is something different. And this is using non-seasonal data. This is using the returns going all the way back to the beginning of the chart. Now, I want to focus on doing analysis with Wayne's Pivots Pro, because this is titled, let's try a Wayne's Pivots Pro stream. But I'm here kind of filling in the gaps of what the trading group actually offers and why you guys should be in the damn Discord. Because there's so much going on. It's really, really helpful. In all the research is in the free section. All these extra nice little indicators are in the paid section. So I see a herald mentioning CPI. Well, we can go to Eurodollar and actually check the daily pivots real quick. So let's go to daily pivots, 1 hour. And we'll go back and reset these settings. Also, my candlesticks don't look normal because it's another indicator that is part of the trading group called FX yield spreads. And that's used as another leading indicator of FX prices to help with trading that. So we have CPI coming out here. Is that correct? Let's check out real quick Financial Juice. They should have things coming out. Yeah, US CPI just came out, and it came out as forecasted. US CPI came out a little bit higher month over month. And yeah, not much else. Core actually came out also as forecast, which is a little lower than the prior number. In the last stream, I did mention that a lot of agricultural commodities are not doing so well because about a third of the world's fertilizer comes out of the Middle East. And the price of fertilizer went up some enormous amount. I believe if I do Alt W, I think I just closed. I think I just closed the window for Trading View. Oh no. Okay, active. Okay. There we go. I just wanted this. There we go. And currencies, commodities, and I believe, no, that's whole milk powder. Oh, did I not save the urea? Is this it? Yeah, this is it. So this is the price of fertilizer. Oh my God, it totally crashed. It totally crashed. I thought I just saw it come down like super hardcore. Yeah. Look at that. Oh. Why does that only go out to 2023? Yeah, and then when I go to a daily chart, okay, so it didn't crash. It's just something weird. Actually, no. The bid and ask girl is all the way down here. Oh my God. Why is the bid and ask all the way down here? That is actually incredibly significant. We have guys for watching the stream, help me figure this out. Did urea prices fall? Now urea is what they use for nitrogen here. Let's see here. News. No. So, yeah, that seems to be just some kind of bug. That looks like some kind of bug. I was like freaking out for a second. Like, no way fertilizers just fell to like pre-2025 levels out of nowhere. That has to be a mistake. That has to be a mistake, because I just looked up some news and I don't see anything anywhere on this at all. That kind of freaked me out. Because that would cause actually a huge amount of food disinflation. So what I was going to say before I saw that number, urea prices are up 25%. So this is the prices we were at, like 460 going into the end of February, and then once we got into Operation Epic Fury, prices jumped 25%, and we're now at 587 roughly for urea. This is going to, if this stays very, very high, this is going to make food prices higher and stickier higher, and that will seep into CPIs for Europe and for a lot of places. The United States, for a lot of places are going to see higher food inflation over the next few months. How big of a jump that inflation is going to be, I actually don't know. But I am adamantly looking at commodities analysts and waiting for them to put out research. And I'm looking for more commodities analysts who are looking at the relationship between inflation and commodities prices. I am proactively looking for that information here. And I want to know what countries are likely to get hit the most, which countries are most vulnerable to a spike in inflation when food prices can jump this high. And also, how long would it take for these prices to follow through, right? It's one thing where urea prices jump up and, oh, tomorrow food prices aren't just going to be 25% more expensive, right? There's an entire supply chain that has to see sequential price increases, and the costs have to be passed down to the customer eventually at the end of the supply chain. And that can take, depending on the supply chain, depending on the item, a very short amount of time to many, many months. So this is the type of research that's actually quite important. And if you look at other commodities, agricultural commodities like soybeans, I believe right here, soybeans are just going up, up, up and away, and they were going up, up, up and away since the beginning of February. So here's February, and then here's that. It's already up 5% more. So soybeans are going pretty darn high. And if you want to set a bullish continuation bias here, it looks like we actually already hit the target here for a bullish continuation bias. Now, a bullish continuation bias is explicitly set in these situations where literally at the beginning of the month or within the first third of the month, you're looking for a very strong positive trend to continue. Because usually you're not opening the month at this pivot point here. And, you know, I use the R0.5 midpoint pivots, but there's other midpoint pivot styles, and there's the legacy M0 to M5. So if you say someone using this, it's just the legacy version with M3. The M styling is, it goes M5, M4, M3, M2. It goes from top down in decreases. But the issue with this styling is if you want to see all of the pivot points with this labeling, and then you go down to below S3, you're now dealing with M-1, M-2, and it just seems arbitrary to do it that way. It's also a little bit easier for people who are newer that I found. And also, this is a much older style. A lot more people who've made midpoint pivots and other pivot point indicators develop their midpoint pivots, their labels this way with the 0.5s. And it's just, very intuitive. Like, what's the pivot point between R1 and R2? R1.5, R.5, 1.5. Very, very straightforward. No need having to think that's like M4. Let's see here. Neutral. But there's other styles as well. There's the H's and the L's, which, you know, if you don't like 0.5s, it then becomes, I think, H2. If you go here and go down to here, H's and L's, that becomes H2, I believe. Yeah, H2, H1. So this is for high, midpoint 1, high, midpoint 2, high, midpoint 3. Down here, low, midpoint 1, low, midpoint 2, low, midpoint 3. Very, very good. But yeah, I'm very actively watching commodities prices because I am definitely concerned with food inflation. Now, there's also issues with energy inflation, right? All the energy inflation that we, like, it's very, very obvious. I don't have to go too deep into it because everyone has been talking about it forever, right? But I'm going to bring this up because this is a huge, huge example of what I call indicator breakdown. When a geopolitical event becomes an exogenous shock and it goes outside of any reasonable expectation you can possibly set using the indicator, you have to stop using the indicator. That's the responsible thing to do. And that's coming from the guy who developed the damn indicator. You cannot, in this type of situation, there's no interpretation you can make that actually makes sense using this indicator other than this, right? Oh, and look, there's the financial juice doing all the things that I was doing off screen, showing you, hey, here's how core CPI released. And I can go ahead and I can forward this now to the economics channel here and Plan the Profit. And boom. Now for all the people who don't want to have to scroll through all this stuff, guess what? They can now just go to the economics channel and see, oh, wow, there was this big economics highlight here. And then over here, we can say, we can respond to it. Came out as expected. Right? And then we can talk about individual bits of news and highlight that stuff. And then Japan says total amount of crude oil to be released by Japan. By both private and state reserves will be around 80 million barrels. I actually need that in the Iran commodities crisis thread because this is where we're watching all the countries react to the commodities crisis, how they are getting involved, what are they doing. This is for all the commodities policy from these different countries. Like you can see, France is saying, hey, the IEA is working on risk scenarios right now, and they're doing oil stock studies by volume. Yeah, so all of the oil related stuff is also getting cross-posted here. And if we want to do a particular chart, so if we go back over here, make the chart nice and pretty, we can go ahead and do the exact same thing. I can copy the chart to my image. We can go over here, post in here and say pivots are not very helpful for interpreting CL this month. But that's just on the monthly chart. When you go to, let's say, a 1 hour, when you start changing the time frames, that price can be a little bit more reactive to. It can be quite helpful. But like in this situation, this is like really not that helpful. I can't think of any pivot bias that fits this at all. This is a geopolitical shock here. This, though, was incredibly straightforward. This day and this day, that's a bullish continuation. This is actually a range-bound trade that's actually more short biased. And that's a standard bullish bias. You just do standard bullish. And then that's how that fits. But then again, this is in retrospect, right? This is in hindsight. However, by this point in time, we would have been able to see, because this is now on March 3rd, the attack was here over the weekend. CL opened on March the 1st. So we absolutely would have known at this point, hey, risks are definitely abound for oil appreciation here. And just buying at the entry zone here actually kind of looks like the dream. The fact that it even went sideways here looks quite phenomenal. And look where the stop loss put you. That seems incredibly reasonable to put the stop loss right here, just below effectively the prior swing low of the prior day as well. Very reasonable in my view to have that as the stop. And also you can set alternative stops if you don't want to just use the pivot point stop. So if you want, you can actually go into the indicator settings. Instead of using a pivot stop, you can use an ATR stop if you want. And this will use an ATR look back of 10 with a multiplier of 2, and it will be volatility adjusted. And you can see, let me actually bring up these drawings here. So here's the gap in oil that we had. So that's the oil gap. And you can see, compared to the pivot stop, right? The pivot stop is a bit higher, and the ATR stop is a bit lower. And in the new indicator, the stop loss setting here to switch between the different stops is actually going to be right here at the very top. So then you don't have to do all that extra scrolling. So you can see this one's a bit lower. But in this type of scenario, a lot of people would actually ignore this stop. Because if you know how to trade gaps, if you've looked at any kind of research or you've looked at other traders who trade gaps in equity markets, what they like to do is put their stops like maybe down here at this prior swing low just behind me, right? Or even at this swing low here. Now, that's looking at things very, very technically. In this situation, by this day, you had a lot of all this extra information that you would have been flooded with in the fall of the Islamic Republic. I mean, we can just scroll and scroll. This is January 4th. Let's see here. We can keep going, scroll down. Look at all this stuff. Look at all this research, man. So this is February 9th. Yeah, we were covering all the buildup, and there's Azerbaijan talking about going in. Oh, and then this is Wise Guy Pizza. We were getting pizza alerts. And then Trump was making all these different statements even back then, and we were looking at the odds, potential insiders on prediction markets. And then I was doing all this extra analysis on all these prediction markets, looking at, well, who might have the best odds right now. It turned out Metaculus had the better odds. On the weekend going into, so on February 27th going into, oh my God, look at this. A heavy open interest on a, quote, by February 28th date and 38%. Yeah, this market went down to zero. Yeah, you can see this is the February 28th market, and it had this huge spike on February 18th, 10 days before there was this huge spike. And it's just one more thing to be like, hey, remember this thing happened? Maybe we should be very, very cautious about this. And if you understand the economic impacts of what the Strait of Hormuz represents for the oil industry, it's very reasonable to expect, oh, this thing went down, back up, and it's effectively going sideways into a buy zone on this particular day. Just based off the news, I'm probably going to have bullish expectations, a bullish bias. So I don't necessarily mind doing something like going long here, even at the central pivot, and putting the stop there. And then on the conservative side, there you go. Now, that's a stop loss of 1.14 using the ATR stop. If you wanted, you could use the pivot stop, and it brings you a little bit tighter. It increases the risk to reward, but not by much, right, to 1.3. But this is also quite volatile. This is incredibly, incredibly volatile. And you could also argue like, oh, what if you got in right at the open? Sure, whatnot. But when you're doing this stuff, especially in retrospect, it's better to be on the more conservative side with doing a trade review and trade history, because unless you have someone who actually is showing you, their trade history, exactly what they did, I stayed away from this because, like I said, I was in the consensus of dollar getting weaker, and I wasn't quite sure if the attack was actually going to happen on the 28th or not over that weekend because of all this conflicting information. So I just bailed. I did not want to have the position open or not. Because they were saying, oh, we're going to continue negotiations on the Tuesday following the week that the attack actually happened. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay out here because maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But then when you go and you look at all the research, it's like, well, you're always on we're always on the brink of attacking them with the huge military buildup, the 85% meticulous odds. It was a huge amount of research we were doing. And once the attack actually happened, it's very clear to say, okay, time to have a bullish expectation on this. Time to go long the dollar. Time to do this. I've taken in all the information I need to autonomously make my own decision the way I want to make it. And so just by having the information freely available for everyone who's in the Discord and to ask questions. See, sometimes people are afraid of hopping in because they're shy and they're like, man, this guy's doing all this research and it's such serious work. Sometimes it's just nice to have other people come in and say, hey, this information has been really useful, and then start up a conversation. Because once you start having a conversation, you can be like, well, what about this risk? Or what about that risk? Or what about this other thing that I'm uncertain about? Maybe we can do research on that. And then that's something new you guys can work on together or alongside with me. It becomes a lot easier when things are more collaborative to overcome issues of uncertainty when you have all these people doing actual legitimate research, trying to figure this stuff out. Now, most of this is research done on X, but every single head of state has an X account, and all of them publish their statements to X. All of them do. Every single government department, every single defense ministry, everyone posts onto X. So it's very, very useful. And guess what? We have a thread here that's on X lists. And I have a bunch of public X lists. If I can, that's right. I'm filtering by elections, geopolitical and economic X lists. And you can see here's the open source intelligence one. And I can go ahead and take this guy out over here and bring him over. Open source intelligence. Iran sports minister. We will not be able to participate in the 2026 World Cup. And then this is some satellite imagery of Iran. Some news on the IDF. Trump has quietly appointed Turning Point USA Chief Executive Erica Kirk to the U.S. Air Force Academy Board of Visitors recently. Okay. Look at that. Flight activity has been for the chartered or U.S.-owned aircraft evacuating U.S. citizens from the Middle East over the last 7 days. So this is the flight path of all the evacuations. So the U.S. getting all these U.S. citizens out of the Middle East. And in fact, I know where that information goes. That information goes into Ari's CENTCOM thread. Because that getting all the planes over there, this is also logistics for CENTCOM. It's not a military buildup or posture related stuff, but it is related to the logistics set up by CENTCOM. And see, if you make a thread and I find something useful, I can very easily share some information there. It becomes really, really easy. Again, we're here to help try and improve the information we have available to make our own autonomous trading decisions. And whether or not you're using pivots or probability pivots or range probabilities or someone else's indicators or whatnot, there's always going to be room for you in that Discord, because all that research is free. And to participate and collaborate in there is also free. And if you want to use Wayne's Pivots Pro really to its fullest extent, you have to have a trading expectation. And that only comes when you're coming to your own autonomous trading expectation. Because, you know, I'm not running a signals group here. You have to learn how to be competent in doing this stuff on your own. And if you're not, nobody wants to be responsible when you take a hit for you. Right? We're not your financial advisors here, okay? And some of the people who are in the group who may or may not have licenses to do financial advisory stuff, they might not legally be allowed to advise you until you pay them or whatever. So it's not worth it to not be responsible. And, you know, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but everybody knows and everybody generally wants to have autonomy over their trading decisions. They want to feel like they know what they're doing and that they are truly actually competent. They want to do more than just feel like they know what they're doing by listening to someone who's, you know, smart about trading, talk about trading. They want to be able to actually do the shit on their own that they need to do, so then they don't have to watch a YouTube stream every single day in order to actually make good trades, right? So the research portion is what I'm really stressing here. And it allows you to do stuff like set up the right bias for Wayne's pivots. And I could go on and hammering that point in. I think I've hammered it in a couple of times now this stream. And I can go also into maybe some more technical things when it comes down to the pivot points themselves. But yeah, I think I'm good with maybe ending the stream here. I know I didn't totally cover absolutely everything when it came down to the pivot points or even go into all the settings, but I know I covered the single most important thing, because the one thing everyone has asked me ever since I made Wayne's Pivots, the free version, ever since I built this version of the indicator, and in every other trading group that uses my pivots, I know for a fact the number one question is, how do I set this damn setting here? How do I set the pivot bias? What pivot bias do I pick? And that comes from setting good trading expectations, which come from doing good trade research, knowing how to interpret the research, knowing how to do the research, knowing who to collaborate with on it. And that's why I find it really important to stress to get into that Discord, contribute to those trade research forums, and then also contribute into the actual research forums. Use that stuff to set up trade research forums for maybe a Eurodollar trade, because there's elections coming up in a couple of weeks here that are going to impact France, not just on the municipal level, but France is a republic. 95% usually of the people elected in the municipality, for all the municipalities that are up for election, the people who are elected into those positions are then the people who are the electors for the French Senate. And half the French Senate is up for election in November of this year. It's going to be a big, big deal, because who gets elected in the municipal elections is effectively going to decide. And we can say with particularly decent amount of certainty who will likely win Senate seats in November or September, I think, in the French elections later this year when that happens. And France is a huge economy for Europe. So if you're trading, euro dollar, and you're not following the municipal elections, and also if you were having a standard bullish bias, you would have been stopped out here. Probably more reasonable here to have a range bias if you're not expecting the thing to fall through the floor. I did hop out of this trade roughly around break even because I was like, like I said at the very beginning of the stream, I was expecting one more push down. Oh, I think I set the wrong bias. This was range, call it range bearish. I mean, that trade's already done. And whether or not you were actually bullish or bearish, now I gotta, here's one thing I will say. I know I was like trying to end the stream there, but here's one thing I absolutely will say. From the research that I have done on pivots, a lot of people like to use the standard bullish and the standard bearish pivot biases. But in most nominal trading situations, for most trading days actually fall in between the range bullish and the range bearish bias. Most trading periods, the quote-unquote correct bias, the bias that technically has the highest profit factor, is going to be the bullish or the bearish range. This one, where price stays essentially between R1 and S1, or you go long right here. If I can get the drawing. Where's the drawing? You go long here, sell here, and then exit again there. That's 1, 2. Yeah, you can just call that 2 trades, right? From here to here, and then from here to here. And this usually actually makes more money than just trading very, very frequently, trying to trade the standard bullish bias in one direction. However, the downside with this is the amount of time. If you look at the amount of time this takes, you would have to essentially be making sure you watch the charts here for 8 hours. And then from here to here, it's another 5 hours. You're talking 13 hours of being awake and cognizant of where Eurodollar's price is going throughout the day. It's not entirely reasonable to expect people to always do that. However, here's London session. So if you trade London session and we're here and you have a range bias expectation, that's pretty straightforward. Or if you were trading Asia right here, I don't know how many people actually, in all seriousness, trade from Asia to New York, or rather to London. This is London, not New York. New York is over here. We're going actually just into New York right now. But you have to consider the time frames, the amount of time it takes to get from one point to the next. And day trading with pivots is significantly harder. Oh, and you see this when it highlights with the orange outline? That's called the active bias. So that's just to say, hey, when the current price is within your bias's entry or exit zone, it highlights it just so then it pops out and says, hey, do you want to make a decision here? And I was saying daily pivots are a lot harder for people to get good at. I've seen people struggle so much with trading daily pivots because setting an expectation, a pivot bias, every single day is really ridiculous. It's really hard to do it. I don't even do it myself. There are some people who are really good at it, but I don't know. Those guys got like magic fingers, they're magic to me. Because that means they're setting really good expectations on the day-to-day, discretionarily. So what I prefer is the range probabilities. When I'm doing day trading stuff, I prefer to use this indicator. And you can kind of see why I prefer it, if you know how to read it. And maybe we'll go over how to read it in another stream, because now it's time to end this one. And so to cap off hey, what is it about trading the daily pivots here, how they're not so easy to trade. I'm just saying it's a lot easier to set weekly expectations and monthly expectations, and to use daily pivots to express and enter those, rather than trying to set daily biases every single day. So instead of trying to set a new trading expectation and a new pivot bias on an intraday time frame, this is where the research also comes in handy. If you want to do trade plans for the week ahead here, well, you need to be doing research. If you want to set the expectation for the week ahead here, you can also use the probability pivots to try and do that. And we have to use a 12-hour time frame to do that for this indicator. And let's say we want to know where the likely high and low is going to be. We use unbiased pivots to look at every single pivot bin here. So next week, about 56% of lows occur between central pivot and S1, which makes me want to either take a standard bullish bias entry or a range bias entry if I'm more conservative. So this is what the range bias looks like, a bullish range. So it says 26% of the time next week we stop out, we hit the pivot stop. 13% of the time we hit a drawdown. 26% of the time we hit the entry, roughly around where the probability weighted pivot is for this bias. And then 30% of the time we actually hit the entry earlier between central pivot and S0.5. And then if we want to look at the odds of exiting, the odds of hitting our target, if we actually take this trade, it's actually saying 60% of the time next week you go past R1. So this actually would be really undershooting things. It'd be really, really, really undershooting things. So maybe actually one thing we can do is just turn on the strategy dashboard here. So I'm going to move myself over here because the strategy dashboard is about to pop up. Yep. So the strategy dashboard is, and it's already set up for standard and range bullish. And all it does is it, instead of like having to go into the settings and look at the high and the low and the close data independently for all the probabilities, that this will automatically give you those calculations and tell you like, hey, here are the odds for the current week right here in the top half of the table, and here are the odds for next week at the bottom half of the table for each pivot bias. And so what I like to do right off the bat is look at stop loss for, let's say, next week, right? So we're just looking at next week. Stop loss, standard bullish hits its stop close to 40% of the time. Standard bearish hits its stop 60% of the time. Range bullish hits its stop 26% of the time, and range bearish hits its stop 39% of the time. So it seems like the bullish seasonally for next week on euro dollar, the odds are in favor seasonally for the standard bullish and the range bullish biases to not get stopped out versus the bearish versions of the same bias. And that's one more bit of analysis that can be done in the trading group. So that's the paid section of the Discord. But that paid section of the Discord comes with all these other indicators too to help with the analysis. So it's not just like, oh, you're paying to join a trading group. You're also paying to get access to these indicators and more like intimate one-on-ones. Like if you need to walk through a trade plan, we can walk through a trade plan. And I am very good at showing people how to interpret the indicators exactly the same way that I do. Because if you can do really basic math, it's very easy to teach you how to interpret effectively really basic statistics. And it's not hard at all to do. You know, some people who have difficulty with math struggle, but it's all about kind of creating the story of, okay, here's how I interpret this number, here's the significance of this number, and it's a lot easier to conceptualize and learn how to actually use this in these indicators, and learn what these numbers actually mean. When you have someone to walk you through it, like step by step, if you're really struggling. However, what I will say, if you struggle way too much, maybe trading really isn't for you. If you can't handle like understanding simple odds, right? If you really struggle with simple odds, maybe trading really isn't for you. That's just the truth. That's the responsible thing to say. Okay, I went ahead and did like an extra 10 minutes here. And I gave a little bit extra here going over the probabilities and the strategies and the whatnot, but I hope this was a nice little holistic breakdown and a nice thing to focus on. Arguably, again, what is the most important question that I always get asked about this indicator, and going over how to actually set this damn setting. It is so important to learn how to do this correctly. And in a situation like we were recently in, going into the beginning of the month with Operation Epic Fury, when to just totally ignore it. When to just totally put it down. Like, this is not helpful. This indicator is not helpful right here. But what is helpful is all the research in the Discord. Getting access to it when it's breaking and watching it develop. Like, again, we were doing research months and months ahead of time. It was like a car crash in slow motion, how far ahead and how closely we were watching it, and how imminent and obvious it was looking that the attack was going to happen. It definitely saved me some money getting out of those dollar trades, right? So I hope this was an entertaining stream, and I hope for all the people who have been getting Wayne's Pivots Pro that you consider also joining my trade group, as well as in the trade groups of the mentors who you like. There are some really good mentors who know what I'm talking about with Wayne's Pivots. It's really important you stick with someone who is going to help you learn how to set better trading expectations on your own. And I'm one guy. If my group grows and grows and grows, I am not going to be able to help everybody. So I really do encourage other people who have their trading groups to, and if you're watching me and you're in another trading group, stick with that guy if you're getting really good information about how to set good expectations for your trades. It's very important to learn how to do that. So with that all said and done, thank you guys very much for watching. And I look forward, again, all the research forums and all the trade forums, all that stuff, totally free. And also feel free to share it into these other Discords, because we're doing a lot of heavy duty research in here. It'd be great to have more people involved, and I am completely open to collaboration. So if you want more people to help do research, send more people. And if you'd like to receive research, if you have a server and guys that you care about in another server, you can hop in here and just forward these messages over, forward the important things that you like over to the server that you like. And then you'll be able to utilize, you'll be able to completely utilize the work, the good work that's being done here on the research end. So go ahead, hop on the server, hop in the trading group if you really like the extra, advanced stats stuff or whatever, the fancy indicators, and you want to work more closely with me and the other guys in the trading group. With that said, thank you guys very much for watching. I know it's like a big run on to the end of the stream, but thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in a bit, and hopefully, please, in the Discord. Alrighty, in a bit.